So let's start having some sacred conversations on race. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. So we got 4 churches together, started having what we call the sacred conversation on race. It was really awkward. Like no one, what's the right terminology to use? How do we didn't know each other because, right, our churches are pretty siloed. We don't have much contact with each other, and we come out of really different traditions. We come out of different neighborhoods. It's like we never cross paths, and so suddenly we're thrown in together, and the first meeting was really awkward. Second meeting was less awkward. Third meeting, we couldn't get people away from the tables to start the meeting because this incredible thing had happened. People had started sharing their stories with each other, and when you start sharing stories with each other, then you find out that, oh, wow, that's not part of my story, but I get that, and here's my story, and now you get a little bit of how I got to my perspective. And so it's in the sharing of stories that there's real power, and there's real possibility for finding common ground. So that was one of the expressions that came out of the commitment to explore inclusive openness. One was around race. One was around poverty. So we're on the near north side. We're in the Freedom Makers neighborhood where the average household income is $10,000 below the state average income. We have a lot of single-parent households. We have a lot of big properties that were subdivided into small rental units. So young families with kids, low income, twice the national average of high school dropouts. So people that haven't been very successful in school, don't have much household income, a lot of high-risk kids in our neighborhood. So we said, we don't want to become a fortress in this neighborhood. We want to continue to engage people in our immediate neighborhood. So we got involved in the Freedom Makers Neighborhood Association. We started working on starting a preschool. We just really started trying to build relationship with our geographical neighbors, because most of our people don't live in the neighborhood anymore, right? Most of our people commute in from other places. The third area that we started looking at was becoming inclusive across sexual orientation. And that is like the hot button issue in the church today. The Episcopal Church is, the Anglican Communion is on the verge of splitting over it. Most of the Presbyterians, the Methodists, everybody's struggling with it. In the United Church of Christ, we ordained our first openly gay pastor in 1972. 1972. I was still in high school. That's a long time ago. My tradition has been sort of talking about this a lot longer than most, but that doesn't always trickle down to the local congregation. And the congregation here in Battle Creek hadn't had much conversation about it. So a couple things started happening. A group in our church, a small group, the Social Justice and Equality ministry team, got together and said, we need to start providing opportunities for dialogue and education. And so they started bringing in, so they found a curriculum, like an 8-week small group conversation curriculum, invited everybody to train facilitators and set up about 6 or 8 small groups so people could come together and have conversation with each other to talk about what scared them, what excited them, what confused them. And then they started bringing in people. They started bringing in speakers, pastors who were gay or lesbian, transgender college professor who lost her job when she transitioned from male to female. This was the real twister. The spouse of a transgendered, the female spouse of a transgendered male to female partner. So she married a man who became a woman, and she didn't consider herself lesbian, so how exactly were they connected? It got pretty confusing. And the 80-year-old women in the audience were, baffled. I had to go have a conversation with them later on next week. They weren't really sure what they were listening to. Just like face-to-face interaction with people of different sexual orientation. And then some things started happening that were pretty remarkable, and I think this is how change happens. It doesn't happen at the conceptual level, it doesn't happen at the abstract level, it doesn't happen with everyone sort of coming to agreement on this issue. It happens at the relational level. So a woman named Holly White came into our church. She had been listening to our radio broadcast Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. We're on the radio, and she'd been listening in her home, and she's a social worker out at the VA hospital, and listened for a while, and then decided one day she's going to come to church. And she came to church just as we made the decision to start this open and affirming conversation, to start these groups. And Holly White is a lesbian, and came to church and heard, oh my gosh, we're going to talk about sexual orientation, and showed up and said, I want to be part of this conversation. And started telling her story. And people got to know Holly White. And when she told her story, then other people in our congregation that had never told their story started telling their stories. And stories of their sons and daughters that had never been told. And at some deep level, people are asking the question, is this a community where I can be who I am? Is this a community that really means it when it says, you are created in the image of God? What really moved us forward was people telling their own stories, and not trying to convince anyone, not arguing over the merits of a particular argument for or against, but people sharing their stories. And at the end of the conversation, we gave people an opportunity to identify where they were across a whole spectrum. So it wasn't, do you want to become an open and affirming church, which in our tradition means a church that invites people of all sexual orientations into the full life and ministry of the church. So it wasn't yes or no. It was, where are you on this spectrum? Strongly agree, strongly support, neutral, disagree but don't oppose, disagree and will actively oppose. So across that whole spectrum, by the time we did the survey, I think no one was on the strongly disagree and will actively oppose. 3 were strongly disagree. The overwhelming majority were agree or strongly agree and will actively support. So we looked at that and said, we are ready to become an open and affirming congregation. So we are the, I think, 848th open and affirming congregation in the United Church of Christ. And it's, it's like one thing, when I look back now, like every decision that you make opens new possibilities, right? And closes off some others. So we had some people who left the church, and we had to be okay with that because there are lots of churches that will welcome them. There are only 2 churches in our community that welcome people who are openly gay, lesbian, transgendered, bisexual. Our church in St. Thomas Episcopal. So that decision was made, and then we started a search for our new associate pastor. And when we indicated that our church was an open and affirming church, suddenly we started getting these profiles of amazingly qualified candidates who were gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual, and would not be considered by most churches. So the pool of available candidates got way deeper, and we were blessed to call Emily Joy McGaughy as our associate pastor, who is one of the most amazing pastors I've ever met. She's a 30-year-old seminary graduate from California. We brought her here from Berkeley, California. It was a bit of a culture shock for her. And is an amazing preacher. Self-identifies as a queer person. Is committed to being single and committed to being a mom. So this year gave birth to her first child. So this is how far the congregation's gone from. I'm not sure how we just want to explore inclusive openness. We don't really know what that's going to be. To calling a queer pastor who is committed to becoming a mom and just gave birth to her first child. So, and it didn't wreck the congregation because that relational piece. Because Emily Joy had been here for a year. People were amazed at the depth of her spirituality. She's one of the best preachers I've ever heard. She's a way better preacher than I am. And a person of deep integrity and strong faith commitment. And because they know her as a person, they don't define her by her sexual orientation. So.